The California gold rush was not really about gold. Gold started it. Gold gave it a story. Gold gave people a reason to sell their farms, leave their families, cross oceans, walk through deserts, sail around continents, and risk everything for the possibility of becoming rich. But the gold was only the spark. The real force was belief. The belief that one discovery could erase a lifetime of poverty. The belief that the West was still open. The belief that luck could be converted into destiny. The belief that wealth was waiting in the ground for anyone brave enough to dig. That dream built California. Not gently, not fairly. Not without violence, exploitation, fraud, hunger, and disappointment. But it built it. The gold rush turned the distant, sparsely governed frontier into a global magnet for migration, speculation, trade, banking, shipping, land development, newspapers, supply chains, and political power. It created cities almost overnight. It moved people across the world. It accelerated California's entry into the United States. It made San Francisco a commercial capital. And it revealed one of the oldest truths in every boom. The people who dream of getting rich are often not the people who get rich. The miners chased gold, but many of the lasting fortunes were made by the people who sold them tools, food, transport, credit, land, clothing, alcohol, newspapers, storage, banking, and hope. That is the hidden story of the gold rush. It was not only a rush for gold, it was a rush to sell access to gold. And that business was often more reliable than mining itself. The story begins with a small discovery at a sawmill. In January 1848, James Marshall was working near Coloma, California, at Sutter's mill. He noticed something shining in the water. It was gold. At first, the people closest to the discovery tried to keep it quiet. That made sense. A secret gold discovery is an opportunity. A public gold discovery is an invasion. John Sutter, who controlled the land around the mill, understood this immediately. He did not want thousands of strangers pouring into his property, breaking contracts, abandoning work, and tearing apart the world he was trying to build. But gold is almost impossible to keep secret. A rumor becomes a whisper. A whisper becomes a report. A report becomes a newspaper story. A newspaper story becomes a migration. Soon the news spread. And once people believed it, California changed faster than almost any place in American history. The first wave came from nearby. Workers left jobs, sailors abandoned ships. Farmers walked away from fields, stores emptied. Ordinary routines collapsed because ordinary life suddenly looked foolish compared to the possibility of instant wealth. Why work for wages when gold might be sitting in a riverbed? That question was powerful enough to break normal society, and that was only the beginning. By 1849, the dream had gone national and then global. People came from the eastern United States, Latin America, Europe, China, Australia, and beyond. Some came by sea around Cape Horn. Some crossed Panama. Some traveled overland across the continent. Each route was expensive, dangerous, and uncertain. But the distance made the dream stronger. If people were willing to suffer that much to reach California, then the opportunity had to be real. That is how boom psychology works. The harder people fight to get in, the more valuable the destination seems. California became a place where imagination outran information. Most people did not know exactly what they would find. They did not know the terrain, the climate, the mining methods, the costs, the competition, the law, or the violence. But they knew one thing: gold had been found. That was enough. The public legend was simple. A man could arrive poor, bend down at the river, and leave rich. That story was irresistible because it collapsed the distance between labor and fortune. In normal life, wealth was slow. It came from inheritance, land, trade, status, education, or years of work. In the gold rush, wealth seemed immediate. One pan, one claim. One lucky strike, one nugget. That promise was the engine, but the internal reality was different. Mining was work, hard work, cold water, heavy tools, mud, long days, bad food, high prices, disease, isolación, theft, conflict, exhaustion, disappointment. Early arrivals sometimes did well because the easiest gold was still accessible, but as more people arrived, the surface gold became harder to find. Competition increased. Claims were contested. Simple panning gave way to more organized and expensive mining methods. The dream was individual. The reality became industrial. That transition mattered. At first, a miner with a pan and luck had a chance. But over time, mining required equipment, water systems, teams capital, and legal control. The goldfields became less like a fantasy of free wealth and more like an economy with barriers to entry. And in that economy, the smartest question was not always, where is the gold? It was, who is selling to the people looking for gold? Because every miner needed supplies. A miner needed a pick, a pan, a shovel, boots, food, coffee, blankets, a tent, transport, a place to sleep, a claim, a drink, a newspaper, a letter sent home, a safe way to store money, a banker, a merchant, a shipper. Gold created demand for everything around gold. That is why the gold rush built California's economy so quickly. It did not only produce miners. It produced customers. And those customers were desperate. A person who had crossed the world for gold could not easily turn back. Once they arrived, they needed to survive. They needed to buy. They needed to pay whatever the market demanded. This created the first great business opportunity of the gold rush: scarcity. California was suddenly full of people, but it did not yet have enough housing, food, roads, warehouses, courts, banks, farms, stores, or basic institutions. Demand exploded faster than supply. That made prices extreme. A merchant who could bring goods to California could make money even if they never touched a gold pan. In fact, not touching a gold pan could be the better strategy. Mining depended on luck. Selling supplies depended on miners continuing to believe, and they did believe. That belief turned San Francisco into the commercial heart of the rush. Before the gold rush, San Francisco was small. After the rush began, it became chaotic, crowded, expensive, and essential. Ships filled the harbor. Some were abandoned because crews left for the mines. Tents, wooden buildings, saloons, warehouses, hotels, gambling rooms, and shops appeared with astonishing speed. San Francisco was not built first as a polished city. It was built as a pressure valve. People arrived there, bought supplies, got information, found transport, searched for work, made deals, lost money, made money, and moved inland. The city became the place where the dream was packaged. News came through San Francisco. Goods came through San Francisco. Speculation came through San Francisco. Banking and shipping came through San Francisco. The gold might be in the mountains and rivers, but the money increasingly flowed through the city. That is one of the most important shifts in the story. The gold rush begins with extraction, but California's future is built through circulation. Gold had to move. Goods had to move. People had to move. Information had to move. Credit had to move. Land titles had to move. Mail had to move. Every movement created a business. This is why the gold rush was not just a mining event, it was an infrastructure event. Roads, ferries, ports, supply routes, stage lines, express companies, banks, farms, warehouses, and later rail connections all gained importance because the rush created a demand shock. California suddenly needed the systems of a modern economy, and it needed them immediately. That urgency created opportunity. It also created disorder. Law was unstable in many mining regions. Claims were often governed by local rules, improvised committees, and force. Property rights were uncertain. Violence could decide disputes. Courts were weak or distant. Ethnic tension grew as miners competed for claims. The gold rush was sold as a dream of freedom, but on the ground, freedom often meant a lack of protection. Especially for people without power. Mexican, Chilean, Chinese, Black, Indigenous, and other non-white miners faced discrimination, harassment, taxes, violence, and exclusion. The foreign miners' tax became one legal tool for pushing non-citizen miners out of profitable claims or making their work harder. The dream of open opportunity was never open equally. That is a central contradiction of the gold rush. California was marketed as a place where anyone could make it, but anyone often meant the people with the right race, the right citizenship, the right weapons, the right group protection, or the right access to capital. The greatest human cost fell on native Californians. The gold rush brought invasion, disease, forced labor, land seizure, starvation, and state-supported violence into indigenous communities. For native people, the rush was not an opportunity. It was a catastrophe. This part of the story is not a side note. It is part of the mechanism. The new economy needed land. It needed labor. It needed water. It needed roots. It needed mining access. It needed political control. That meant existing communities were pushed aside, exploited, or destroyed. California was not built on empty land. The gold rush myth often imagines a blank frontier waiting for ambition. The real California already had people, cultures, economies, and territories. The rush did not discover California, it overran it. That is why the phrase "built California" has two meanings. It built cities, banks, fortunes, and infrastructure. But it also built them through displacement, exclusion, and violence. Both truths belong in the same story. As the rush continued, the mining economy changed. The easiest gold became harder to find. Individual miners had to work longer for less. Many who arrived expecting quick wealth ended up broke, in debt, or stuck doing wage labor. This was the moment when the fantasy began to collide with arithmetic. Travel to California cost money. Supplies cost money. Tools cost money. Food cost money. Claims could fail. Theft could happen. Illness could destroy a season. Prices in mining camps could be brutal. A miner could find gold and still not become rich, because the gold had to exceed the cost of chasing it. That was the hidden math of the rush, and many people did not understand it until they were already there. The public image was a man finding fortune in the river. The private reality was a man spending his savings to compete with thousands of other men in a place where every basic necessity was overpriced. This is why the merchants often had the better business model. They did not need every miner to get rich. They only needed every miner to keep trying. That is the genius and cruelty of boom economies. The dream itself becomes demand. A miner who succeeds buys supplies. A miner who fails buys supplies. A miner who arrives buys supplies. A miner who leaves buys supplies. A miner who writes home creates another future customer. Hope becomes recurring revenue. That is the business model behind the myth. Some of California's most famous business stories grew from this environment. Levi Strauss came west as a dry goods merchant, not as a prospector. His later company became tied to durable work clothing, the kind of product demanded by a labor economy built around mining, railroads, farms, and physical work. Wells Fargo emerged in the early 1850s to provide express and banking services in a place where moving money and valuables safely was a major need. These stories matter because they show the real pattern. Gold created wealth. But the more durable wealth often came from organizing the chaos around gold, transporting it, storing it, financing it, selling to those chasing it, building the city around it, turning a rush into an economy. That economy did not stay in the riverbeds, it spread. Agriculture expanded because miners needed food. Ranching and wheat production grew. Ports became more important. Merchants imported goods from around the world. Newspapers grew because information was valuable. Real estate speculation exploded because people believed California's growth would continue. The rush transformed California from a place people traveled to into a place people invested in. That distinction matters. A rush can fade. An economy can remain. By the mid-1850s, the early surface mining dream was already changing. More capital-intensive methods became important. Hydraulic mining blasted hillsides with water. Hard rock mining required deeper operations. Companies and investors gained power. This was the end of the pure individual miner myth. The lone prospector remained in the cultural memory. But the industry moved toward capital, machinery, and scale. That transition repeated the entire logic of the gold rush. The first stage was hope. The second stage was competition. The third stage was consolidation. At the beginning, gold looked like a democratic miracle. At the end, it looked more like every other business. Those with capital, tools, networks, legal power, and infrastructure had the advantage. The gold rush did not eliminate hierarchy, it rearranged it. And California became the place where that rearrangement happened fast enough for the whole world to notice. The state's political transformation was just as dramatic. California entered the United States at a moment of national expansion and conflict. The gold rush made California too important to remain a distant territory for long. Its population growth and economic importance accelerated the push towards statehood. California became a state in 1850. That speed was extraordinary. Gold had turned geography into urgency. The United States now had a Pacific prize that mattered economically, politically, and strategically. California became a gateway to the Pacific, a symbol of manifest destiny, and a future anchor for trade with Asia. Again, the gold was not only metal. It was leverage. It made California impossible to ignore. And once California became central, the need to connect it to the rest of the country became more urgent. The Transcontinental Railroad would come later, but the gold rush helped create the economic and political imagination that made such connections feel necessary. A continent had to be tied together. People, goods, mail, gold, and power had to move faster. The rush revealed the cost of distance. Infrastructure was the answer. This is how a mining boom becomes a nation-building force. Not because miners planned it, but because their movement exposed what the system lacked. California needed roads, courts, banks, ports, police, newspapers, farms, schools, hospitals, and eventually railroads. It needed institutions because the rush had created a society faster than society could organize itself. That is the broader lesson. Booms create speed. Institutions try to catch up. During the gap between speed and order, fortunes are made, laws are improvised, people are exploited, and the future is shaped by whoever can move fastest. The gold rush was exactly that kind of gap. It created opportunity before rules. And people with money, ships, merchandise, weapons, credit, legal knowledge, or political influence could use that gap better than the average prospector. That does not mean every miner failed. Some did strike it rich. Some made enough to change their lives. Some built businesses after mining. Some stayed in California and became part of the new society. But the popular image of the gold rush exaggerates the miner and underplays the system around him. The real question is not, who found gold? The better question is, who captured the value created by the belief in gold? Often, the answer was not the person standing in the river. It was the person selling the shovel, or the person who owned the store. or the person shipping the supplies, or the person lending money, or the person buying land, or the person building the city, or the person collecting fees from everyone else's hope. That is why the gold rush still feels modern. Its structure appears again and again in oil booms, in real estate booms, in stock bubbles, in cryptomanias, in startup gold rushes, in AI infrastructure booms. The names change. The psychology does not. First comes the discovery, then the story, then the migration, then the people selling access, then the prices rise, then competition increases. Then early winners become proof that everyone can win. Then late arrivals pay more for worse odds. Then infrastructure gets built. Then the original opportunity becomes harder. Then the people who sold the dream often remain after the dream fades. California was not built only by gold. California was built by the economy of chasing gold. That is a much more powerful statement, because the gold itself was finite. But the systems created around it kept expanding. San Francisco remained. The ports remained. The banks remained. The land speculation remained. The agricultural growth remained. The transportation networks remained. The myth of California as a place of reinvention remained. That myth may be the most valuable product of the gold rush. California became more than a location. It became an idea, a place where a person could arrive from somewhere else and become someone else. A place where the future seemed negotiable. A place where risk looked like courage. A place where failure could be rewritten as movement. That idea survived long after most miners stopped finding easy gold. It later attached itself to Hollywood, aerospace, Silicon Valley, venture capital, personal computing, social media, and artificial intelligence. Again and again, California sold a version of the same promise: come west. The future is being made here. You might get rich. And again, the same hidden pattern appeared. Some people did build fortunes by creating the new thing. But many fortunes were made by building the systems around the people trying to create the new thing. Studios around dreamers. Banks around builders. Landlords around migrants. Platforms around creators. Cloud companies around startups. Infrastructure around speculation. The gold rush did not only build California's economy, it gave California its operating myth, the myth of sudden transformation. The myth that geography plus ambition can rewrite a life, but myths always hide costs. The gold rush made California richer and more connected, but it also intensified inequality, racial exclusion, environmental damage, and violence. It created opportunity for some by destroying security for others. It turned land into claims, rivers into extraction sites, and hope into a market. That is why the story cannot end with celebration. The gold rush was both creation and destruction. It built California as an economic power. It also revealed how quickly a dream of wealth can become a machine that consumes people, land, and law. The final irony is that the original discoverers did not become the great winners. James Marshall, the man who found the gold, did not become the symbol of lasting gold rush wealth. John Sutter, whose land became the center of the discovery, saw his plans overwhelmed by the rush. That is the perfect ending to the myth. The people closest to the gold were not necessarily the people who captured the future. The future belonged to those who organized the rush. That is what California became. Not just a place where gold was found, a place where desire could be converted into migration, migration into markets, markets into cities, cities into power, and power into a new version of America. The gold rush began with a shiny piece of metal in a mill race, but it did not end in the mines. It ended in banks, ports, farms, railroads, newspapers, courts, real estate, statehood, and the long California belief that the next boom is always waiting somewhere just ahead. That belief built the state. And it also left a warning. When everyone rushes toward wealth, the safest fortune may not be in the treasure itself. It may be in selling the map.